Join me for a deep conversation with Seed Levine, outdoor athlete, poet, philosopher, and farmer living off-grid on Hawaii, working the land. We'll go through some dark places as well as some joy and uplifting present tense. Please join me. Welcome to the Avid Adventurer. I'm your host, Dave Secunda, founder of Avid Adventurer, and I am psyched you're here. Each week, just like today, I'll bring you an interview with a kiddo, young adult, or parent as they share not only the details of their noteworthy outdoor pursuits, but also how they navigate risk, challenge, setbacks, and service in their journey. It'll bring a smile to your face and you'll feel your heart expand as you get to know the inner landscapes of these athletes. After listening, I know you'll feel uplifted and ready for your own next Avid adventure. So let's dive in. All right. Welcome, Seed Levine. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself with your pronouns, where you are, your age, just a little bit about yourself. But I am so excited to have this conversation. This is a different kind of conversation than I've been having with other guests. And I have known you as an outdoor athlete, as a poet, as a philosopher, and more recently as a farmer. And I really look forward to this conversation as we work to kind of unpack how all of those things interact with each other to bring you to where you are today. So to start with just like a brief introduction and then physically tell us where you're at right now, because that's a great jumping off point for the conversation.
Great. Likewise, I'm very thankful to be here and having this conversation with you. So, like you mentioned, my name is Seed Levine, and I go by they, them pronouns. And I'm currently living and located in Ahualoa, which is right above the town of Hamakua on the Big Island of Hawaii.
Beautiful. And right now, you're calling in on a laptop computer from a piece of land that you've been farming that is off the grid. Tell us a little bit about that to start with, kind of where you are right now, and maybe connect it a little bit to your chosen name as well, as it seems very, very connected.
Yeah, so my family purchased around 38 acres of land up in a beautiful part of the Hamakua Coast. We're surrounded by large eucalyptus trees, strawberry guava, a lot of cane grass, and cow pasture. And I have had the opportunity to grow food on about a quarter acre of this land. And food and seeds and the act of growing has been a passion of mine since 6th grade, if not before. And it's been the one activity that has been consistent throughout my life, in that it's been the one thing that when I am engaged in, I feel like myself.
It's beautiful.
And there's no other way that I can accurately define who I am truthfully than that of a seed. I see us all as seeds, as just little bundles of potential that can grow into something pretty unimaginable. And so, yeah, my life has and continues to be a journey of kind of unlocking that potential. And, you know, more recently, a past life has really brought to light the fact that I I was pretty much buried, but like a quote I like, and I can't remember the person who I should attribute it to, but it goes something to the tune of, "They buried us, but they didn't know we were seeds." And my past self buried myself. Thankfully, I was a seed, so I've since sprouted and am growing.
Hmm. Well, from my sense of seeing pictures of you on your beautiful land up there, growing the food that you are, it feels like a place that you have found yourself. Share with us just kind of a recent experience of joy or upliftment on the land, and what brought that forward.
So recently, I have been kind of clearing out the quarter acre from kind of 6 months of continuous planting and cropping, and it's it's been an incredible 6 months of learning. And on this one particular day, um, the weather was pretty pristine, and it was late in the afternoon, and I was picking up some rotting cauliflower plants, and um, with that incredible stench and the flies around and that soft wind and golden light, it's just the perfect contrast that really grounds you in the moment as it stimulates all senses, um, and just kind of made me stop and recognize like where I'm at and where I've come from, and you know, all that I want to do in the future as it relates to agriculture, which has become my love and my life. And so that was a pretty incredible moment. And then every day, I can't believe how fortunate I am to wake up and walk outside and see this incredible garden and envision a future of more and more and more acres like it.
Mm.
Um, because you know, all I want to do is feed the community, and currently I'm focusing on root vegetables. I have found a kind of infectious, uh, I would almost say like obsession with carrots. And
Mm-hmm.
carrots are generally hard to grow in the tropics because the heat and the humidity um, will usually result in a carrot that's either weirdly shapen or really bad tasting. Like it tastes kind of bitter and piney. Um, and in addition to that, uh, I should have mentioned previously, uh, I am a big fan of seed saving. It's actually one of the ramps that kind of got me to where I am today in terms of growing food. It started as a sixth grade science project in a garden on my then school campus, uh, growing rows and rows of cucumbers and beans, and watching how those plants and fruits matured, um, past market maturity to the point of seed maturity, and collecting those like big yellow cucumbers and dry brown long beans, and then watching as those fruits and pods, created these seeds that could then, be the start of so many more plants. And carrots are interesting because they're biennials. So they need 2 years or a period of vernalization in order to go to seed. And we don't have winter here. So it would be hard to get biennials to go to seed. And so I've started to look into tropical carrots. And I've actually reached out to researchers from the USDA, and some other researchers from local colleges here, and have been able to get my hands on a few cultivars of tropical annual carrots that were bred in Brazil. So that's a kind of a side project that I hope to become a main project, but it's creating my own carrot, strain of carrot that can be produced here and sold here. Not only the seeds, but the roots, as I want to become a mass producer of carrot and beet roots in the future. That's actually my like 2 to 5 year goal, is to acquire 20 to 100 acres of land and start growing beets and carrots on a massive scale. And I know I'm going down a huge tangent here, but to bring it back around, it's all starting here with this pilot plot up in Oahualoa. Again, it's about 10,000 square feet, so a little under a quarter acre. And I'm focusing on those root crops, so turnips, carrots, radish, beets. I'm also growing a little bit of cauliflower. It's a sprouting cauliflower for restaurants.
So clearly, Seed, I mean, you're all in on this project. You're 19 years old, living off the grid by yourself up there, or pretty much on the land and farming this land, moving this project forward. Is that correct?
That is correct. My parents come to visit from time to time because my dad does some work out here at the Seal Hospital, Keikaiola, and Dolphin Quest.
Yes.
But other than that, I am pretty much on my own, surrounded by an incredible community of neighbors who really have facilitated the beginning of like a trade economy. So every week I give a neighbor down the road Oz carrots or turnips, and he'll give me a dozen eggs. And the same is true for other neighbors in the hood.
I love it. I love it. Well, let me ask you a question that goes a little bit deeper, if I could. So I can tell, and our listeners can tell, your level of commitment. And if they could see you, they would see your level of upliftment just as you share these experiences of the smell of the cauliflower or the appreciation and gratitudes for the surroundings. I mean, you exude the joy that is clearly present from being on this land, going all in with this project, and creating this vision for the future. And I really commend that. Before we started recording here, you and I were having a conversation, and we're talking about, in the past, some of the outdoor pursuits that you would kind of lean into, which my perception in knowing you were maybe stair steps to where you are. But what you shared with me is that they were really an escape from kind of a difficult inner landscape, and that those experiences of, for example, trail running would increase in frequency or time or distance. And to somebody watching you from the outside, it might look like passion for the outdoors. What I hear you saying is that it was really kind of a form of escape, and kind of a drug in and of itself. So now you're leaning full in on farming. Feels like a very different feeling to you. but pursuing it with that same zeal, that same passion. Talk about your own kind of understanding of like how, I mean, maybe it's not the right question, but how can you distinguish between escapism and passion and kind of alignment? Because some of these escape things kind of took you down some rabbit holes that were, close to your own peril, I will say.
Yeah, I think this is a very deep question, and as a younger person, um, I would engage in a lot of activities like running, like paddling, and I would take them to the extreme level of whatever it may be, just to get away from maybe some darker feelings um, of the state of the world and the state of kind of my own perspective on life. And when, during that time, I also had the opportunity to be in the garden. I was fortunate enough to work on some farms and continue working on the garden that I'd started um, in my sixth grade year at Lanikai Elementary School, now called Kauhau. And it's pretty easy to distinguish between the two because when I was running or when I was paddling, all I wanted was to move as fast as I can. All as fast, like I just wanted to get that sensation of everything is a blur, and that's when there was a very temporary shot of like peace and tranquility, or what I interpreted as like a moment of peace and tranquility. Um, but whenever I stopped, those feelings also stopped, and reality hit me again in full force. When I was in the garden, everything was moving in slow motion, and I wanted to be there as long as possible, and I wanted to feel myself. So rather than trying to run away from myself, I wanted to be there present with myself and my thoughts in the garden. As I felt held, I felt supported, I felt understood by something that I, you know, can try to understand, but honestly would have a hard time doing it, whether it's the embodiment of like this universal truth or just the individual spirits of the plants, the animals, the seeds working together in this synergy to create an environment that was like this cradle that I needed to actually come down to earth. So in a way they're similar, but they're also night and day opposites, because on one hand I was trying to get away from myself. I was trying to separate, like, basically me from the world, and I would repeat these activities like at the peril of my own life and health and body. And on the other hand, this was this nurturing experience that I felt like I needed to actually come down to earth and to stay on this earth. And I attribute like the garden, my farm-ily, I call it, um, to my kind of continued existence here, in addition to my family, of course. But I needed that. I honestly needed that because, and sure, maybe it also was a crutch in a way. And today I have learned to channel those feelings I that I would, feel in the garden. I've learned to carry them with me wherever I am, whether that's in a city, on a plane, or like just in some place that I might not feel as comfortable. Because I did experience a lot of social anxiety as a youth, and so yeah, I guess today I'm a lot more stable in that sense, but it's because of the garden and um, what it's given me, the tools to cope, etc.
So let me just say back a few things that I'm hearing. And this is kind of speaking of these activities, running, paddling, as we've already discussed, as just wanting to go as fast as you can to get that experience of a blur and kind of maybe a moment of reprieve from the inner landscape of anxiety and challenge. But that was not a lasting result, and it really is, that you're recognizing that is more and more of a temporary escape. And then at the same time, you had the good fortune to have garden or gardens in your life, that you realized more and more brought you that joy and that upliftment and that grounding in this earth, that you could lean into more and more. Does that sound, do I have that right? Yeah.
Yeah,
So in that journey of, and I'm sure that many people who are listening have had experiences of social anxiety or depression or great challenge. Can you talk about that point of navigation or that inflection point of realizing the areas of your life that you desired to kind of turn the volume down on, and then seeing the garden and farming as an area that you wanted to turn the volume up on? Um, yeah, talk a little bit about that, because in those moments of desperation, sometimes it's hard to recognize those
right,
differences.
exactly. It becomes a habit or an addiction in certain ways, and both bad and good habits are not easily overcome, or established. And so during moments of great inner turmoil, it it can and still is sometimes hard to to cope. But rather than turning to kind of self sabotage, I now turn to my circle of influence, which is the garden. I don't see myself as like this controller, or manager of Mother Nature, but I see myself as a part of it and as a servant to the earth in a way. Um, and it is in those moments when you're able to recognize the good that comes from what you're doing. And I just, when I would repeat habits of running or paddling, it there was no beneficial outcome to to the rest of the world, um, and there was no beneficial outcome to myself either.
So, Seed, now with the perspective of your connection to the land and your grounding that occurs there, are you able to return to those activities such as running or paddling with a different perspective, or have they just kind of lost that draw for you?
When I initially had made the switch from really relying on those activities as a crutch to kind of becoming my fullest self through the seed, um, I was really against running and paddling. But as that kind of wound has healed, I have been able to slowly return to those activities in a similar fashion to how they were practiced before I started to heavily rely on them. It's like my breath. So now, when I do travel back to Oahu to visit family, um, I do enjoy paddling or walking, which is like a mix between walking and jogging with my family, because the outdoors has always been something that we have valued as a family. So outdoor activities such as running and paddling and rock climbing and hiking have pretty much become embedded into daily life at home. And at first, after, and to remark on the previous question about like how I made that change and when I made that change, it pretty much was a near death moment. Um, and I don't know how it got that far, but it did. And I am grateful for like the many second chances that I've been given. And, you know, I don't know what number chance that was, but I finally got it.
Yeah. I am so glad that you are with us. Can you say more about that near death moment and that ability or good fortune to end up where you are right now? Again, I just kind of think about people who are listening who could be in a similar experience. And what were those doors that opened for you? I've heard them kind of reflecting upon the garden and your family, and maybe your writing as well.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. So I don't know how to directly answer the question, but I would say that that moment was me kind of giving up on life, right? And deciding not to nourish myself and not to really acknowledge the fact that I had a body. And as I was wasting away, I would spend more and more time in my mind, and that's when I started to channel writing, because that's pretty much the only thing I had the energy to do. And I became this kind of just talking head, which was pretty much the furthest away from who I who I was. That's when I felt the furthest away from who I was. Um, and and then everything kind of was a blur from there. The next thing I can remember is kind of waking up in a hospital bed and people asking me all these questions, and like all of a sudden everything became clear. Like, you know what? I I'm here to speak for the seed, and that's who I am. And so at that moment, I decided to choose life and realize that, you know, if I'm gonna be alive, like, I don't want to live a lie, because my past had been a lie previous to that moment, and or before that moment. And so I just started to completely embody my truth and accept, the world how it was, myself how I was, in all of our imperfections, and and figure out where to go from there. And the answer to everything has just been really to plant the seeds. And um before before I decided that I wanted to, like, commit myself 100% to farming, I was in the education and outreach kind of sector, teaching people about farming and seed saving. And I realized the only reason I was there and doing that was because, like, my body wasn't in a state, like, in in healthy enough state to actually be in the field doing what I wanted to be doing all along, which was, growing the food. And I find it so weird, how I was denying myself nourishment, and yet that's the only thing I wanted to do, is, like, grow food. And now, I don't know. I don't want to say that things have kind of just aligned perfectly, but everything that was, it's all kind of ironic, I guess.
Well, I just want to acknowledge your incredible journey, to kind of witness all of this from afar, and to really kind of find this current place, which is not only not escapism, but just, it feels like, from when I see photos of you on the land or videos of you doing a harvest, like, just through you, joy, connection, like this artesian well of who you are in connection with the land. And so I just want to acknowledge what an amazing journey, from what you've just shared, of these moments of, gosh, we're lucky to have you here on this planet still, to where you are right now. And being on this land, and again, just like the wind behind you is a constant reminder that literally you are on the land, you are off the grid, out on this piece of land, kind of working your intention forward. Let me ask you to share a few things as far as your outdoor adventures that you're excited to share or proud of, or things that are kind of big moments for you when you look back across your life.
I guess there's, like, one general theme in all of the adventures that I've had outside, and something that I hold really close to my heart, and that is the fact that um I grew up with parents who really facilitated this notion of being outside and doing things outside as a way to rekindle a spiritual and emotional connection with ourselves and the greater universe, as well as each other. And that's something I continue to carry. It's like a core value to this day. and in every experience I have inside and outside. Because, it's that notion that being outside and moving your body or not moving your body, but just being present and having all your senses stimulated by something, whether it's an activity, or just like sitting under a tree, having those moments, like it it's something that's hard to describe, but at the same time, so easy to understand because it's beyond thought, and it's just it's in emotion. It's definitely right side of your brain kind of thing. And so all is to say that those moments, whether they were embodied in activities like paddling or rock climbing or hiking, mountain biking, surfing, farming, there was this anchoring nature to them, and that's really what keeps me sane to this day. And a couple specific things that really stand out to me are like some family outdoor activities that we did. My dad used to have a sailboat, and one New Year's Day we actually wrecked it. I had to swim in. um, we were like a mile off the coast, and it was amazing. It's just those moments that make you feel so alive when you're kind of on the edge of everything.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. So say a little bit more about that particular experience. So you're out there sailing and you wreck the boat. Does it hit something? Like what happens? And does the boat actually sink or what happens?
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting day. So it was raining on and off, and there were like just these interesting gusts of wind, and there was this pocket of still weather, so we decided to go out. And out on the water beyond the reef, we were just floating. Then all of a sudden there was this wall of weather, and my dad pretty much lost control of the boat. It started to just fly out to sea, and the only thing so we were like encompassed by this storm, and we were flying out to sea at really fast. And the only reason we stopped is because our mast broke under the pressure, and it started to sink, and with that, so did the boat.
Oh my
And so we had to cut the lines connecting the mast to the boat, and it was just us floating on kind of the hull and the raft part until we discovered that there are leaks in the hull. And my mom and dad were freaking out. My mom was like, she took off her shirt, was waving it in the air because there was this Coast Guard boat a couple miles away from us. They were there because Obama was visiting, so they were kind of patrolling the, outer.
President Obama, who has a place out there. Okay.
They were patrolling the outer banks of the island, and she was trying to get their attention, but because they were, a ways off, there was no use, but she was doing it anyway. One of the reasons why we wanted to go out is because we wanted to see whales. At this time of year, the humpback whales come in large numbers. And what was funny is that as our boat was, sinking beneath us, like we were ankles deep in the water on this raft. We saw whales. There were like 3. Started breaching a couple hundred yards away from us. So that was a surreal experience. And then, uh, you know, things didn't really calm down, but because we didn't have a sail attached to us anymore, we weren't moving extremely fast, and we were starting to float back into shore. Although we were also starting to come near the Mokaluas, which are these 2 islands off the coast of Lanikai. And somehow our course set us directly, kind of in a trajectory to crash with them. And so when we were like 30 yards off, just like these really rocky banks of the Mokaluas, we jumped, we bailed, swam around to a beach access, and there were people there who like miraculously were there, number one, and number two, we knew and safely brought us into Lanikai Beach, where we proceeded to run home and tell our grandparents that that's the reason we were late. Of course, they didn't believe us, but to New Year's dinner, because we're always late. But eventually, we showed them the proof when our boat crashed into the beach next to Lanikai Beach a couple days later, totally wrecked. And the sail, the mast, has never been found.
Oh my gosh.
That sank to the bottom of the ocean for sure.
Okay, I'm so glad that I asked a little bit more about just like a family adventure, so to speak.
And that's only one. We've had many more.
So tell us just a little bit about like what comes next. You talked about kind of your long-term goal with that, but tell us a little bit about what's coming up in the next few months on the land.
So currently, selling my crops to restaurants, food hubs, and local kind of grocery store chains. And I would like to start increasing the production capacity on my current land base by really honing in my growing techniques, and in addition, increase my land base. Don't need to be at 20 acres yet, but I have been looking for sites in Lolamilo, which is an agricultural area up in Waimea, and I call it mini California because it's the perfect environment for growing vegetables that are more cool weather crops. So the carrots and beets would thrive up there, as the climate is, this perfect combination of dry slash cool slash like just, I don't even know how to describe it. It's the soil is perfect. The temperature is amazing, and again, there's not as much humidity, so that's perfect when you're trying to grow vegetables, which are, by nature sensitive to humidity and heat, because with those conditions come pests and diseases. And I'm currently working up at a lettuce farm in Lolamilo, and they're on a much larger scale. So that's also inspired me to explore the potential of utilizing mechanization. and machinery like tractors and harvesters. And so as I look into that, I have been becoming more and more aware of kind of the ability that we as a state could have to produce more and more of our own food if we, appropriately apply these modern tools and technologies. I, was pretty opposed to many man-made objects in my younger years, and have now become aware of the fact that it's really how these incredible creations are used that reflect their merit, not, what they are and how they've come about. And so, in looking to apply some of this more modern ag technology, the scale at which you can grow things with the amount of man hours is incredible. And yeah, it just excites me because I realize that the ag industry here is incredibly centered on seed crop, like GM seed crops. That's actually 2/3 of all our exports, are corn and soy, um, that have been produced on Oahu and Kauai, namely, um, that are genetically modified. And then there's, the coffee industry and other more like Hawaii advertised niches like pineapples and lychee. So yeah, we have seed crops, tree crops, and there's really not a lot of and there's cattle, like, yeah, so there's seed crops, tree crops, and cattle, but the amount of vegetables that are grown here are fairly limited. um, I'm sure you may have heard the statistic that we import over 90% of all of our goods, and I'm estimating we import, even more vegetables than 90% of vegetables that are consumed here.
On Hawaii. Yeah. And the islands. Well, see, I so appreciate kind of the breadth of the journey that you've taken us on, talking about everything from your outdoor pursuits and escapism to some of the darker moments in your life, to realizing and leaning more and more into the magic in the universe of the seed and the land and the garden and farming, and then talking a little bit about your vision to expand this and willingness to kind of fold in the learning around mechanization, and the right use of tools for the highest good of the land and people, and the potential that's there to reduce imports and thus reduce our carbon footprint by growing more and more locally, which is something that certainly applies to all folks. What else? Are there any other things that we haven't talked about that you think are really important for people to know about you in your journey?
Let's see. I mean, I think we really summed it up pretty good. Like, these days, I'm all about just carrots and beets and large scale production. I mean, I used to be so kind of dogmatic about the fact that, you know monocultures are destroying our 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 land, and organic is the only way to go. And I'm not saying that I've done a complete 180, but I just decided to follow a more neutral path and be aware that, there are pros and cons to all practices. And acknowledging, the just the agroecology surrounding us all, and the core mission of feeding, nourishing, and nurturing both the people and the planet. And I think as long as I hold that true to my heart, I'm not gonna be kind of swayed by certain alternative motives, because again, the main goal is to produce as much food as possible, but not at the peril of myself, other people, or the land. So we're always trying to make and leave the environment in a state that's better off. So I don't want people to get the idea like I'm going all into like, root vegetables without proper crop rotation, or that I'm just going to be using tractors to till up the same strip of land again and again and watch the soil erode into the waterways, etc. No. I've spent a lot of time thinking about how, one can refine such practices, that are pretty streamlined, um, into more, I guess, or less in, less, like, if I'm trying to say is I've spent a lot of time doing research on what other people have done research on. So I want to attribute like my future practices to them, my current and future practices. Right now, I'm just doing everything on a hand scale, and so I'm just rambling on about my aspirations to buy large scale equipment and machinery, and farm on a larger scale. That's been my goal for quite a while. But more recently, it's become a goal that has shifted to the top of my list as I've honed in on like my techniques for like now that I feel confident growing the crops that I'm passionate about and have identified this niche market for local roots. Because a lot of people are just growing greens, and not only are greens, maybe not the most calorically dense foods, but the market is very saturated for greens here. And so I'm, again, just rambling on, but really interested in growing roots on a large scale. And now that I feel confident that I can grow them on a hand scale, I'm excited to kind of go from here.
Well, I can see you light up as you talk about it. It's wonderful to watch you beam as you talk about that current and future thought. And what comes to mind for me in the way that you've been kind of evolving your perspective on the land and your farming is this term high commitment, low attachment. So you have great clarity on the end goal of feeding people and leaving the land the same or better, and then the attachment to exactly the path there. It feels like there's some growing openness to kind of explore around the edges of that path. And I feel like that's a great message for listeners in general, for us all to be able to kind of step out of the potential maniacally narrow path forward to kind of see around the edges and keep focused on the end goal there. Well, Seed, thank you so much for your time in the literal outdoors on your land in Hawaii. And it has been a total pleasure speaking with you today.
Yes, and same to you. And one final thought I guess I will leave you with is the fact that kind of, you know, having this goal of becoming Hawaii's primary producer of beets and carrots, it definitely grounds me in kind of it. While I have a much larger vision and end goal, it's nice to have something that can channel all of my present energy into. I don't know.
Awesome. No, I see it. I absolutely do in the day to day and working the land. And I look forward to seeing more photos and videos of harvest and the day to day activities out there. Seed Levine, thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed hearing from this avid adventurer as much as I did. Join me every week as we continue to explore the inner landscapes and outer accomplishments of our guests. And if you know someone who you think would make a great interview, please reach out to me at the email in the show notes. I look forward to reconnecting next week.